profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered, even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I talked last time about personal agency, and I want to expand that today to look at collective and interactive agency. And I found that a really good place to begin is appropriate to the date with the Declaration of Independence, which says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." We hold is a statement of agency. It's not, there are these rights, but we hold, we take them, and we account for them. So the declared rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are rooted in the capacity to uphold and pursue them. And this was radical in its time, very radical. It was a great step forward, and yet a minority saw even then the blindness in it. You know, all men meant all white men, preferably those with owning property. And women were not on the table at all. So when we speak of personal agency, this is our individual capacity for meaningful action. And each of us has some degree of choice according to our values and preferences to act. But that very capacity can bury and ignore great discrimination in its forward thrust. And perhaps especially when it's collective agency, because then our personal blindness and our collective limitations link together, are harnessed together, and run roughshod over all sorts of things that are either ignored or carefully disparaged, consciously disparaged. So when all group shared views, all views have some narrowness, and group shared views tend to have more narrowness so that there can be more people who agree with them, a larger pool. Full of assumptions. And personal agency, too, is full of assumptions. My agency is tied to my own independent views and values, but how independent are any of our views and values? I was talking with someone recently about getting vaccinated and not getting vaccinated. And the person said, "I don't agree with everyone saying vaccination is important. I have individual views." So where does this individual view come from? There's no one I've encountered who's saying this has closely reviewed the range of scientific papers on the vaccine to assess knowingly the risks of the vaccine versus the risks of not getting vaccinated. And this is equally true of those of us who do get vaccinated or have gotten vaccinated. We tend to choose our authorities wholesale. Either we trust science and Fauci, or we mistrust medical and maybe other authorities, precisely because they're authorities. And there are some good reasons to hold maybe care or doubt regarding the authority of agencies, because we mostly don't carefully explore all the sides of issues that present themselves. We tend to take the position of our peer group. or of our own previous you, and where did that come from? And then we find arguments to support our position. So our independent views are not so independent. All the decisions and choices and actions that go into my personal agency aren't just mine, either in their origin or in their action and consequences. Even our most idiosyncratic personal choices don't arise in a separate, private place called me. So the focus on personal agency that I went into pretty much exclusively the last time I gave a talk obscures a vital and huge side of purposefulness. So beyond individual agency is collective agency. And what I think of as my personal agency is very strongly shaped by collective agency. The collective agency is all the purposeful actions of our society, say, or of any group, of our Sangha. And it's central to our individual agency. And we cannot shake it off. Our collective world is us, which reminded me of Pogo, who famously said, "We have met the enemy and he is us." In the strip, Pogo is out in the swamp with his friend Porcupine. And Porky says, "Ah, Pogo, the beauty of the forest primeval gets me in the heart." And Pogo says, "It gets me in the feet," as he's gingerly picking his way. The next frame shows that he's trying to walk through a landscape filled with trash, broken cans and bottles and all kinds of garbage. And Porky says, "Well, yes, it is hard walking on this stuff." And then Pogo answers, "Yep, son, we have met the enemy and he is us." So this was Walt Kelly's strip for Earth Day, 1971. The political and the personal cannot be separated. We are the political and we are the personal, and we walk on the ground of the political as much as of the personal. We are the body politic. The collective agency is very powerful and often resistant to change, but then occasionally moving wildly like a grass fire. You can think of it as collective will. So the US, as a world power, has great collective agency. With so much power, the impacts are huge, and responsibility is huge. You know, the US seeing itself as a benefactor and a leader, where is that accurate and where is it not? And who is this US if it is not the small lowercase us? One of the great challenges and problems in collective agency is feeling and understanding that others are of value, that they are subjects in their own right, and furthermore, that we are not separate from them. So how far out from your skin do you care? And we care so much what's inside this body skin bag, and close around it feels very intimate to us. We only like to have people we feel already close to within that sort of intimate space. And so then when we choose to hug someone, we want it to be a positive choice. Otherwise, it's threatening. But when it's a positive choice, it's expanding our sort of personal envelope just a little bit further. But one of the major aims of Buddhist practice is to extend that range of what matters to us. As the Loving Kindness Sutra for Bodhisattva says very famously, even as a mother, at the risk of her life, watches over and protects her only child. Just so, with a boundless mind, should one cherish all living beings, extending love over the entire world, above, below, and all around, without limit. In this aim, in this direction, in this path, personal agency and collective agency are inseparable, completely made of each other. Because my aim is that my collective agency will build out of my personal ability to see and value and love and to extend that and to receive that back. So the weaving of individual and collective agency is everywhere. A very different but telling example of this is structural racism, which is a prime example of the weaving of individual and collective agency. We have eaten and drunk racism all our lives. And if you're a person of color, there have been innumerable attacks on your integrity. If you're white, like me, it's more often been events sort of unseen by us. And much of the point, really the point of unpacking whiteness or becoming anti-racist is learning to see beyond what we have seen and understood, and then learning to act on what we see, showing up. Because what we can't see, we are enthralled to. We're doomed to repeat and reinforce it. And that's why anti-racism is a thoroughly Buddhist enterprise. Seeing what we haven't been able to see, showing up and responding, learning to cherish all living things in all areas of life, bringing a wider, more inclusive perspective to all that happens, to all that we think and feel and do. So the practice of unpacking whiteness or seeing through structural racism is the work of our life. And I just finished a course called Unpacking Whiteness from a Buddhist Perspective. And then we did quite a bit of role playing. I'm terrible at role playing, but even so, stuttering and anxious, you learn something. And then a couple of days later, I found myself in not a racist issue situation, but at home with a house guest who made a request that we had to say no to. And she was hurt and went back into her room. And there's a tendency among nice, quiet white ladies to leave it at that. She needs time to heal, right? But I had just finished trying to show up. So I knocked on her door and said, I'm sorry that this must be painful for you. I'm sorry I had to say that. We love you. And it healed it a whole lot faster than trying to tiptoe around each other for a day to see whether we did. So the action of learning to show up in one area permeates other areas. It is all a connected life. Now, our society, since there is generally a US society with so many small societies within it. So our general society tends to be very focused on the individual. Each must make her own way, determine her own path, rise to her level of success. And so we tend to think really primarily in terms of personal agency. Now, other societies are much more group oriented. Each person within that group cares very much for their own self, but the group is the source of their ground and success, not just their own individual effort. And so they focus more on collective agency. But both views, individual agency and collective agency, are partial. and ignore the central truth that all agency is interactive. All life is interactive. Now, a couple of our recent talks have invoked the grand image, the great metaphor of Indra's net, right? The net flung across all of life, filling the universe with a jewel at every node, every intersection of the net. And we usually focus, and the whole tradition usually focuses on those jewels. Each jewel reflects all the other jewels in an infinite regression. Each of our minds reflects all the others. Each is made of the images and ideas of all the others. Our twinkling reflections are the light of our minds, our sense of who we are, and these twinkling reflections are made of all of the other twinkling reflections. So seeing Indra's net in terms of the jewels is a very insightful or incisive way to focus on personal agency. And then collective agency pays attention to the net itself. Every being doesn't just reflect all the other jewels. Each being is part of a single universal net flung across the heavens. We wouldn't exist or be us, have a place to twinkle and reflect without the net supporting us, being us. That's our collective agency. But what is the net? It's a world of interwoven strands. And it is the connecting strands that support the individual jewel being and that make the collective net function, cohere. Our world is a world of interactive strands, interactive connections. Agency is always interactive. The personal is interactive. The collective is a gathering of interactions. Life is interaction. We call this a world of endless giving and receiving. That's a beautiful image of the world of interaction. And in this interactive world, who is a subject and who is the object of that subject's agency? Indra's net is a vision of all subject, which is the true meaning of inclusion. We, not I include you, but we are in this together. All beings are subjects equally. And while we may see this, may agree with it or not, we can inquire into it. The Dharma always says, don't just take this because someone has said so for centuries. Study it for yourself, explore it in your own body, mind, and life, and talk to others. But one of our deepest human problems that we continually look to or focus on or to aim to understand is that we see almost exclusively in terms of self and others. And therefore we see them as separate from us. You are separate from me. And I come first. Me does come first for us. And what you see, what you call the object of your gaze, is turned into an object. Equally, the object of your affection now is an object. And when we do this, when we sort of other or make objects of people and animals and trees and clouds, we reduce them, we disparage them. And we do it so automatically that we don't notice it. We've been educated into this. Our minds are geared that way, to see ground and background, to see fore and back, to distinguish and to discriminate one from another. And it's a very important function for all creatures, all animals, plants, and fungi. But we don't notice what we're doing. And what we don't notice, we don't account for. So every person, every other being that we diminish. And that does harm to them. I'll just think of the last time someone ignored you or disparaged your view. It hurts. It belittles, diminishes us. And we almost never notice that disparaging others harms us as well. Because we are belittling ourselves too, because we're in an equation here. We're so deeply linked that belittling others belittles us. And when we live in a world of objects, when we see our world as a world of objects, we too become objects, just kind of fancier ones, but objects nonetheless. And Indra's net says, nah, all are subjects in endless interaction. When we live in the world that Indra's net shows us, a world that is subject to subject, we can be freely interactive. We won't be dragging ourselves down by interacting with some other. And it's much easier to extend caring. The Bodhisattva Sutra is trying to give us ideas and sense and feelings for extending our caring much wider than we would think it might extend. It's much easier to care for a subject than an object. Even robots, when people adopt little robots, they tend to give them names. It's also dogs. A dog that just is some stray dog is that. But a dog named Angelina is a particular dog. It's a she, it's a who, right? So when we personalize, we're creating subjects out of a world of objects. And the more we live in a world of subjects, a world in which we can meet and extend and care and see equality and care for, we grow through our interactive agency. We grow wider and deeper and more connected. Our world becomes richer. All animals have agency, and all are interactive and interlinked. And I said animals because lately I've been discovering plants. Plants seem to be different, to lack agency. The tree stands in the forest, separate from the other trees. We see them as passive. We don't even want to ascribe instinct to them. Somehow or other, they have coherent patterns that somehow got evolved. We leave it it's a very passive gray area. And this turns out to be yet another false assumption of humans, used to justify all sorts of bad human behavior towards plants. Plants have agency too, far more than we know. Now we don't know how plants experience their problems. I mean, they do have problems, severe problems. Climate change is a terrible problem. There are problems all along through life for every plant. Would it be pain? Would it be joy? Is there some kind of responsiveness is happening there? In any case, they navigate complex, stressful lives with some sort of compass. Some people call a compass a self in a living being, but that's a step too far for many people, I think. At least they have some kind of self-orientation and self-protective ability to protect themselves. Right? And their individual agency, they take in information from their environment and they respond complexly. And their individual agency leads them to collective agency. You know, we've all heard about trees, a tree being attacked by an insect, putting out chemicals that are not to deter that insect from their leaves, but that inform the other trees in the area that they need to produce maybe something that's really bad tasting into their leaves to repel the insects before they even arrive. There's collective agency. My father lived in Laguna Beach and had a staghorn fern in a basket on a tree. But their native habitat is the moist forests of the southern hemisphere, where they are rich and plentiful. They're epiphytes. They live on trees without harming the tree. A tree may be covered all the way up and down its trunk. And a curious scientist wondered why there would be so many up and down one tree. And it turns out the plants, the ferns, don't just happen to live near each other. They divide tasks among them. As a group, the ferns on a particular tree specialize their labors. Their leaves function differently on different parts of the tree. Some are gathering up more moisture, some are wicking moisture back to the roots on the edge of the trunk. And it's the staghorn-like fronds that form spores for reproducing. And some of the ferns on the tree aren't producing any spores at all on their ferns, while others are producing a lot of them. Is this suicide? Is this extreme altruism? Nope. The plants divvying up the jobs according to what will be more efficient. They form colonies, just like bees and ants. And it turns out that joining together improves their survival fitness, as it does for bees and ants. Big colonies of them on a tree have more spore-bearing fronds together than each one individually would have if they were separate. And so they have an increased reproductive capacity. Well, we don't know how they organize this, but they do. They do organize their collective colony lives. Ferns and trees. Well, that's a fern. I don't know why I say just a fern, but trees turn out to have complex relationships of give and take among them. We see trees. I was taught to see trees as reaching up and spreading their canopy to maximize sun exposure, growing roots through all sorts of obstacles to reach their nutrients, strategizing. But we were taught that in this strategy, they were competing fiercely for resources, fighting for their place in the sun. And in recent years, that story too has been changing. Now, we've heard about the insects, the trees, advising other trees around them that there's an imminent insect attack. But their cooperation turns out to go much further and deeper. Great networks underground where we can't see them. And my current hero is Suzanne Simard. Maybe a few of you have encountered her. She's a Canadian forest scientist. Spent her lifetime studying forests being logged in British Columbia, mostly fir, cedar, and birch. And the loggers kept clear cutting and taking out all the birches because that seemed to them, that was the old model, separate all the trees, one to each its own little patch, let each one grow up to, and that will maximize productivity. Well, it doesn't. It turns out that the forest is far more, and those trees are far faster and bigger, richer growing when they live in a more complex society. So she felt this was the case. She started to see this. It felt intuitively wrong to her to clear cut and then plant trees in their separate little spots, all of one species. So she dedicated her life to understanding how this happens. And she found that mature trees send nutrients through their root networks to other plants, to other trees. A lot of this happens through the activity of the mycorrhizae. Whenever one of us sprinkles Sure Start in a little hole when we're planting a little plant, we're spreading these mycorrhizae, the little fungi that live on the roots of plants and facilitate the plant's uptake of nutrients. So already the fungi and the roots are in a nice symbiotic relationship, a mutual aid society. But that's just the start. So the trees send nutrients through their roots and the mycorrhizae, connecting them and sending them on to the next roots, especially to seedlings to help them get started. And like us, trees tend to send more nutrients and water to closely related trees. I mean, you do DNA analysis, they know too which ones are closely related, but they also share more widely, judiciously. More for my baby, some for yours. Mother trees support young trees of their own species all around them. Not only their own progeny, but all the others of that species. And then trees support trees of other species. Turns out that the evergreens in winter they are doing their photosynthesis and producing CO2, which they send through the roots to the birches, which are leafless and have no access to glucose and glycogen making molecules because they are not photosynthesizing. Then comes summer, when the birches have a magnificent photosynthesis network factory going, and they send nutrients back to the firs. We have no idea yet who decides how much to send when, but they do it. So Simard was booed off the podium for many years for this understanding of agency in trees and cooperative agency in trees. She couldn't get research dollars. She was doing her work with black plastic bags. It's because that was what she could afford. But she persevered, and she's now a top recognized scientist in the interactive social lives of trees. And she has a new book called Finding the Mother Tree. It's a wonderful book, but I especially would recommend finding one of her TED Talks. They are just wonderful. Suzanne Simard is just a brilliant vision. She writes of understanding trees as people and as having agency. There I was just a couple of weeks ago reading her book, and there she's talking about agency in a place where I hadn't seen it. I hadn't understood it. She says the trees are akin to us humans with a spiritual quality, perhaps not unlike ours. They have generosity and choice. And she says, they are people. They are tree people. She says, we need to recognize that trees and other plants have agency. They perceive, relate, and communicate. They cooperate, make decisions, learn, and remember. Trees live the truth that collective agency is interactive agency, and that individual agency is also interactive agency. It's like, in a way, it's a sense, a parallel to investigating racism, a field where there's a way things are, and then we come to see how different they are. And that case becomes something that is relevant to our whole lives. And so it is with trees. It's easier to study the mutual interactive networks in some ways between trees than between people. We're so complicated. Maybe we are more complicated than the trees. That's probably still to be not for sure, is it? No one is an island. Islands are not islands. And when a tree falls in the forest, all the other trees, shrubs, fungi, and small animals here have some awareness of it, some response to it. The fallen tree becomes a wonderful nursery log for baby seedlings that might not be able to survive on the forest floor where there's duff and other creatures and other plants in the way. So many of them live on the decaying mother log. They're called nursery logs. So the fact that I'm not there to hear the tree fall in the forest is immaterial, really. So the view that saw trees in unending competition is the same view that saw us two-leggers is in endless competition. And yes, there is conflict and competition, and it can be healthy or unhealthy, but that is a special case in a larger world of cooperation and interaction. Of course, conflict is a form of interaction, but it's antagonistic interaction is a very limited case of interaction. And most conflict really results from misunderstanding, and which has led to fear, misperceiving a world of others who want my share, a share of my pie, and the world is not a pie. It's not a zero-sum game. All the beings in the world grow through cooperation. Competition can have its beneficial effects to some degree, but primarily is cooperation at work. We share this planet and we share this life. Our life path, our life as a path, is the work of seeing clearly, waking up and showing up, caring more widely, living in terms of the truth of endless, non-stop interactive agency. This path that we see as the path we choose, is the very activity of life. We are choosing the activity of life, the interactivity of life. Thank you. So, thoughts, comments, questions? We have orchardists, entomologists, gardeners here. It's not just about plants, but of course that was the newest piece for me. Thoughts about agency?
So how do you, Jisho, interact with people that are not willing to, well, they don't understand the idea of agency and the good of the community, and they confront you with it? How do you react to people like that to not alienate them, as a good Buddhist?
And that's hard. When someone actively confronts you, it's hard. It's hard enough when someone just has a very different view and wants to make it known, because we do feel confronted by that. And it's possible to not take it in and say, oh, I see, you have, that's a very different view from mine. There's always room for validating something and not going where it's not just going to be butting heads. It's a lot, and there's listening. Because a couple of days ago, a couple came for tea, and they're friends, not close friends. And Elska brought up the reading we've been doing on anti-racism. This has been something that's been very lively for the two of us. And then I followed up talking to the man just kept quiet. It became very clear that he didn't agree, but he just kept quiet, which was fine. But his wife wanted to respond and say, well, isn't everything really we're all kind of even and equal. And I said a little bit more, and she sort of pulled back a little. And only afterwards that I realized that I needed to, rather than more tell her what I thought, I needed to just listen. I needed to listen more to what she thought. And then I might have gotten further or not, but it would have been a different dialogue, more dialogue. So we learned painful step by step to when to engage, when not to engage, when to say, I hear that's different, or could you step back a little and say it from further away, or this is really not a good time for me to talk about it even. You know, you can just, sometimes it's just deflect. So, because that's the thing, it's all interactive, but that doesn't mean that I have to eat his view or her view. You don't have to either, right? Interaction can also be more, in a sense, loving, more caring, to not take it on, to let that be theirs.
Yeah, isn't that sort of perpetuating this strange view? Things that are definitely not true?
Well, most people who have a strongly held view are not going to shift it because you tell them a different view. They believe their view is right. You believe your view is right. They believe that you are misinformed, but furthermore, just as you believe that they are misinformed. And so there's very little room to move there. Those times you mostly have to let go, deflect, at best, thank you for your view, at best, and let it be. But so there are other times when you can say, someone says something, but they're not so forceful with it. You could actually ask them to explain their view, not because you want to challenge it, just to hear it. And that might be something that you or they will learn from furthering that dialogue, and maybe not. There's just so many things we can try. We usually have such a small toolbox. I have a pretty small toolbox for conflict, and I could use a little wider one. No, we all could. Roberta, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a wonderful talk. I like to think of trees as my primary family. Trees have always been very meaningful to me since I was a small child. But in this collective thing that you're talking about, I've forgotten the term you used. Oh my gosh. I was viewing it from how family systems break down when there's conflict. Mm-hmm. And there's been some conflict in my family and a bit of a rupture with anti-vaccinators and those who are pro, and I'm on the pro side. And I used to think education was sacred and the key to bringing enlightenment. Well, I'm wrong about that. People are very strongly identified, passionate with their view. And the one thing I learned through a lot of painful learning, but good learning, is to find out from somebody else started talking to me who is a friend in my community, who is very loving, about her anti-vaccination view. And I learned a lot from her. And I learned something that I could take with me to a family member and just share that I respect your right to feel and think as you do. And I hope that sometime we can have a dialogue. And both of us have done nonviolent communication, that model through Marshall Rosenberg. Mm-hmm. And that's a very important one to remind myself that there's no right or wrong. We have to remember, we really do think we're very right. And I'm very right in my anti-war stand, and my very right in so many different areas. However, when there's a person you're close to who really has identified differently, and there's all kinds of reasons for that, mm-hmm. Don't you think? I mean, it may be a way to establish an identity separate from the family. separate from mom, who's pretty strongly opinionated, are identified in a certain way. So to soften my approach and be about love and inclusion, to find what is touching one another is what is most meaningful, I have found. And I see what you're saying is so relevant to the, it's relevant everywhere, and most importantly right now in my family system. Thank
Just
you.
like you, when I find that as you, if you're finding that this other person can make sense to you and be, because she's presenting it gently, you can take it in more. Then we can turn around and be gentle, more gentle in our approach to the next.
Yes, you got it. And
Yeah,
yes,
thank you so
and I was kind of, was attacked on Facebook by a granddaughter, and it threw me into such a wild loop. It took me a week to recover, actually. I was just, kind of in this other altered state of feeling so diminished and sad and all those things. But it brought me to focus on, well, what would have worked better?
Yeah. And social
What could
media.
I have done instead of going into my usual knee-jerk reaction? How can I stop myself? It isn't about stopping someone else.
Thank you.
Jisho, thank you very
Susan.
much. I'm constantly thinking, so how do we go from seeing this world of agency, this world of, interacting subject, how do we translate that from a view into a practice, into a daily expression?
When I would attend residential ongos with Katagiri Roshi at Hokyoji, we would be silent and swarming around. Even if there were 12 or 15 people, you were coming and going and working and sitting and had jobs to do. And he wanted us to stop every time we crossed paths with somebody else, stop and bow. And that was very irritating because we had somewhere to go. And there are so many things we can do that to interrupt our pell-mell approach, to interrupt our closed minds. I didn't know that doing this unpacking whiteness was going to help me deal with my stepdaughter or deal with myself, be able to be wider. Whatever we find a new opportunity to expand our minds and our caring, we go there. And we shrink and we forget. And that's what we have Sangha for. And the Dharma for is a large part, to remind us of ourselves, to remind us of our path and of our intention. Because we'll always keep forgetting it. But the more we root our intention deeply, the more often we can return to it. Reading each other. Thank you.
Sure. I have a quick comment. One of the hardest practices, that I've had in life is, and I think most people suffer from the same illness, so to speak, is that when we're talking to someone, especially if it's about a subject like COVID or whatever, is that we spend most of our time in that conversation thinking about what we're going to say next, rather than actually listening to the person and trying to understand what they're saying, and then forming and the old interactive training that you got in the 70s, it was, you responded by saying, now what I'm hearing you say is, which is probably a little old fashioned these days, but at least a point of sitting there and thinking about what this person is saying before you respond.
It would happen when there's a bit of disagreement, or someone disagrees with our view, which is who we are, our values. We immediately become a little defensive, and they become a little bit more further away, more other. And we are we're much more likely then to lecture and carry on that way. And to be reminded at times like that, that this is a subject in front of us, a person like ourselves. And just as their view is founded on limited information, so is mine. I may think mine is better information. I may be right, but still, between us, there needs to be a respect that we lose track of. I think the subject to subject view is also a view of having respect for what's in front of us. And that's certainly our Buddhist teaching, that everything deserves respect. Fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles, let alone people and trees. Thank you.
Jisho, I wanted to thank you for bringing up Suzanne Simard. I believe that there was an article on her in one of the New Yorkers not so long ago. And very interesting, the amount of attention she put into her research and then being totally blackballed for years on end and then getting back in. And so that was encouraging. And the other piece of this is sometimes it's conflict with some. In my family of origin, we never discussed things because we were to avoid conflict. So humor was used a lot. So now when the siblings get together, which we will in a week's time, it's almost everything is diffused with humor. And it's, I find myself sometimes picking up on it and trying to take it deeper. So, I'm seen as the one that's, bringing, taking down the party. But it's just learning different ways to catch things and then, call a sister later on and say, oh, what I heard was this, but what was it that you were actually saying? So these awarenesses are helpful. Thank you.
Okay, perhaps we should go to announcements before, or do we go to the comment? Let's do our verse first and then announcements.
Closing chant is in the chat. For great Bodhisattva beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless, I vow